Hello and welcome. My name is Roberto E. Marrero Soriano. Together with my classmates Ximena Mosquera and Katia Mendez, I will be touching upon certain aspects of the humanistic approach to second language teaching. Enjoy. What is the humanistic approach to learning? Sprung from the thoughts of humanism, which is a philosophical stance that emphasizes the value and agency of human beings, both individually and as a collective. The humanistic approach emphasizes on empathy and stresses the innate goodness in relation to human behavior. Howard Gardner and his theory of multiple intelligences. What is intelligence? Intelligence is a term not so straightforwardly defined. The most compounded definition of intelligence is the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. In essence, it is the ability with which we apply that which we have learned. What is intelligence, as Howard Gardner would define it? Gardner has many times refused to provide a clear and concise definition of the word intelligence. Instead, and in his words, an intelligence is the ability to solve problems or to create products that are valued within one or more cultural setting. His ideas and theories challenged the understanding that intelligence was a singular unit easily measured by standard IQ tests. Instead, with his theory of multiple intelligences, originally proposed in 1983, he stated that individuals have different intellectual capabilities. Over time, these initial 7 intelligences were modified and expanded upon, and as of 2016, there are a total of 10 intelligences officially recognized by Howard Gardner. Howard Gardner's 7 intelligences. In relation to the school and classroom, verbal linguistic intelligence, the well-developed verbal skills and sensitivity to the sounds, meaning, and rhythm of words. Mathematical logical intelligence, the ability to think conceptually and abstractly, the capacity to discern logical and numerical patterns. In relation to the arts, Howard Gardner named 3 specific intelligences. The first, musical intelligence, the ability to produce and appreciate rhythm, pitch, and timbre. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence, the ability to control one's body movements and to handle objects skillfully. And the spatial intelligence, which is the capacity to think in images and pictures, to visualize accurately and abstractly. In relation to the personality, interpersonal intelligence, which is the capability to detect and respond appropriately to the moods, motivations, and desires of others. And the intrapersonal intelligence, which is the capacity to be self-aware and in tune with inner feelings, values, beliefs, and the thinking processes. In addition to the initial 7, Howard Gardner later added 3 other intelligences, one in 1995, one in 1999, and the final one, as of consideration to that year, in 2016. The first one was the naturalist intelligence, the ability to recognize and categorize plants, animals, and other objects in nature. The existential intelligence, the sensitivity and capacity to tackle deep questions about the human existence, such as the meaning of life, why we die, how we got here, where do we go after death, and what is our purpose. The final one, he described in an interview, as that which allows us to be able to teach successfully and to other people. That would be the teaching pedagogical intelligence, the final of the 10 originally proposed by Howard Gardner, for the purpose of providing examples of possible careers for individuals categorized within each of Gardner's intelligences. For the verbal linguistics, They could be authors, journalists, and speakers. For the logical mathematical ones, they could be scientists, engineers, and accountants. For those with musical intelligence, composers, musicians, and sensitive listeners. For the bodily kinesthetic ones, surgeons, craftspeople, dancers, and athletes. For those with spatial intelligence, architects, artists, and sailors. For the interpersonal ones, successful teachers and mental health professionals. For the intrapersonal, theologians and psychologists. For the naturalists, farmers, botanists, ecologists, and landscapers. And for those of existential intelligence, priesthood, religious studies, and spiritual guidance. Gardner's understanding of intelligence is still relevant and discussed by many psychologists and educators to this day. His view has allowed teachers to approach their students' needs and particular skills in a new, more personal way. Each student possesses individual skills and intelligences that separate them from the class as a whole. Every teacher, second language educators included, must be aware that each have unequaled intelligences that facilitate their learning in different levels. Gardner's work allows us to understand that to each child there is a particular intelligence. Now I leave you with my partner Ximena, who will continue to expand upon this with Carl Rogers and his views.
Hello, my name is Ximena Mosquera. Following with the humanistic line as our main focus is, and my teammate Roberto mentioned, I'm going to talk about Carl Rogers and his theory of humanistic psychology. Who was Carl Rogers? He was an American psychologist and one of the founders of the humanistic psychology who falls on the perspective of a constructivist view of learning because of his belief of putting the learner at the center of the educational stage and his thought of the learner constructing their own knowledge. He was not exactly a learning psychologist, but he had a great impact on our understanding of learning, more exactly in an educational or pedagogical context. Now, what is humanistic psychology? Humanistic psychology is one of the most important line of thoughts in psychology, in which some theorists defended a positive vision of the human being, stating that all humans are capable of becoming the kind of people they desire to be. It means that humanists believe that all human beings are innately good and also are in control of their own destinies, and this particular aspect of human nature drives the development of personality. Now, let's talk about Carl Rogers and his humanistic psychology. In his theory, Rogers studied the whole person as a physical, a cognitive, but more important, an emotional being. He believed that humans must trust their ability to find happiness and mental balance, which for him it was to becoming a fully functioning person. And at the same time, he urged for humans to be sensitive to the needs of others. For Rogers, if a person lives at peace with all of their feelings and reactions, they are able to reach their full potential. His formal principles are motivated on the development of the individual's self-concept and on his personal sense of reality. According to him, we all have an innate urge to move towards situations and people that will help us grow. It refers to a person's knowledge of her own strengths, abilities, behavior patterns, and temperaments that will allow them to discover their own personality. He felt that the essential and principle of behavior is the ability of human beings to adapt and grow in the directions that improve their existence. It means that all human beings have within themselves the resources and the ability to discriminate between what is important and what is less worthy in order to pursue the goal of personality or cognition. Now, why is it that Carl Rogers had a great impact on education? Even though he was not known as a learning psychologist, as I already mentioned, his position has an important implication for education because he has said a lot about education and he is responsible for studying a number of research projects to find out what works and what doesn't in the process of learning. Roger was highly critical of the authoritarian philosophy that saturates the educational system, in which the teachers assume the role of power and direct the activities of students. As well, he criticized that the grades are based primary on examination, and he requires the students to imitate back specific facts that the teachers consider important. His belief was that the result of these activities will be that many potential outstanding students develop negative attitudes toward the learning because they will perceive it as an unpleasant obligation rather than a great opportunity. Because of his belief, he stated that our schools are more damaging than helpful to personality development and are a negative influence on creative thinking, and that they are primary institutions for incarcerating or taking care of the young to keep them out from the adult world. His own position about education is that he finds teachings of little value and prefers to adopt the role of facilitator of learning. And to be really a facilitator of learning, there are three essential things that are needed if the aim is really to help with the learning process. These three essentials are to be genuine, to accept the students as a worthy, valuable individual, and to communicate openly and kindly with their students. In this way, the teacher creates a psychological climate that facilitates the students' ability to think and learn for themselves. The goal of education, according to Rogers, should be to prepare people to be open to change, flexible and adaptive, who learn how to learn and are able to create their learning process throughout life. If we trust the students, provide them with the resources and facilitate their learning, then we are teaching them the skills for tomorrow, which is more important than filling up their brains with meaningless information. Because as Carl Rogers said, the only person who is educated is the one that has learned how to learn and change. Now, what is it? What is the impact of Rogers' humanistic psychology in the acquisition of a second language? Well, when Rogers' theory is adapted to the language teaching and learning, the classroom will be more student-centered direct, where students will feel that they have more of a role in their education and will engage in their own learning process, leading it to a more efficient acquisition of the language. Also, by creating an environment where the students can be relaxed and reveal their own self, they will be able to communicate freely and non-defensively with teacher and classmate, allowing them to construct part of their own knowledge by interaction. Now, what is it important for language teachers to know about Rogers' humanistic psychology? If teachers know about humanistic psychology, it will be beneficial for the students and the learning process. They will be able to adapt the classroom to a more student-centered environment where decision-making will be a shared process with the students helping to devise their own program of learning. Class periods will be unstructured with no lectures or formal procedures so that students may form and express their own opinions. The teacher will be an optional resource and will provide explanation, comment, or suggestions only when asked to do so. This way, students will enjoy the process of learning and will discover and develop directions that are truly rewarding. To summarize, we have seen that Rogers was concerned with the motivation and self-constructed knowledge of the students rather than with how the students should be taught. So in general, Carl Rogers' humanistic psychology focused his approach on the affective part in which my classmate Katia will direct her topic. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Katia Mendez and I'm going to be talking about effective learning. What is effective learning? Well, effective learning has its focus on the student's interest, their perceptions about a thing or a topic, and their aspirations. Whether they learn it or not will depend on the student's acceptance of instructional content. In other words, it will depend on how we deal with things emotionally. If we value what we are learning, if we feel enthusiastic, if we have motivation to learn, and a positive attitude towards learning. Benjamin Bloom and his colleagues provided an extended version to define the affective domain that is still used widely today. It has 5 stages, the first of which is that people must receive the stimulus and give it a controlled or selected attention. Next, the person must respond and commit to a phenomenon or person voluntarily and receive satisfaction from that response. Third, involves valuing, which is placing worth on a behavior or person. Fourth, is the organization of values into a system of beliefs. Finally, individuals will understand themselves according to their value system, integrating beliefs, ideas, and attitudes into a philosophy or worldview. As our classmate Ximena was saying, and as Brown said, Carl Rogers based his theory of education almost exclusively on the fundamental of effects in learning. He believed that as human beings, we are emotional creatures. Hence, we can be influenced by the affective domain on our first and second language acquisition. Affective factors in second language acquisition are self-esteem, which involves self-confidence, self-knowledge, self-efficacy, and belief in one's capacities. This is to say that a person who has high self-esteem is likely to be successful at acquiring a second language because they feel confident in themselves. They believe they have the capacities to acquire that language. However, a person who has low self-esteem will likely struggle in acquiring a second language because they do not feel as confident in themselves and they do not believe they are able or they have the capacities to learn a second language. The willingness a person has to communicate and to take risks to answer a question is also important. For example, in a classroom setting, there are some students who will likely yell out an answer or guess an answer that to a question a teacher poses, but there are some other students who will be more shy about it and be afraid of guessing because they think they might get it wrong and they do not want to be embarrassed. Inhibition relates to self-esteem. Inhibition are the metaphorical walls a person puts up to protect what is self-perceived as weak or fragile to the ego, due to lack of self-confidence in a task. Anxiety, on the other hand, is the tension and worry because of the language. It can be debilitative or facilitative. Debilitative anxiety is harmful anxiety that can stop a person from completing a task, whereas facilitative anxiety can be beneficial because they might be more interested or pushed into completing the task, and they might do it very well. Some other factors in second language acquisition are empathy, which is the process of putting yourself in someone else's shoes when communicating. Extroversion, which is when the person has this need to receive ego enhancement from others, whereas introversion is when the person feels fulfillment from within themselves. Motivation, which is what I believe to be one of the most important factors in second language acquisition, it is the central variable of effective factors for successful learning. Extrinsic motivation is fueled by the anticipation of a reward beyond the task, which can be a present or getting a job. But intrinsic motivation finds that the reward is the activity itself. Effectiveness is an indirect strategy-based instruction in the language classroom, but along with the others, which are memory, cognitive, compensation, metacognitive, and social, it can be very beneficial in many ways. For example, they can lower inhibitions. They can encourage risk-taking, build self-confidence, develop intrinsic motivation, engage in cooperative learning, use right brain processes, promote ambiguity tolerance, practice intuition, set personal goals, and process error feedback. In conclusion, these three subjects are related to each other in one similar important way. They all relate to learning through a human perspective. Howard Gardner presented us with the different intelligences a person can have. And Carl Rogers presented us with his theory that human beings are emotional creatures. Thus, an important factor to learning is the human effectiveness of the lessons. Thank you.